Hello class. Today we're going to go over chapter 3, sexual offenses and offenders. This is a pretty interesting chapter, so make sure you read it. There's a lot of information, and make sure we're going to go over some of the paraphilias, but make sure you read about those in this chapter because you probably will see some of these again. Okay? If you have any questions, please email me or put it in the discussion tabs. So the gist of this chapter is how someone becomes a sex offender. So the book talks about paraphilias or sexual disorders, and basically a disorder is a diagnosis that's been based on the DSM, and there's several major or primary paraphilias that can lead somebody to have a sexual disorder. So some of these will be kind of interesting. Some may be funny to you, but people have these disorders that are walking around right next to you and you may never even know it, okay? And then there are those sex offenders that have these types of paraphilias or sexual disorders. So a sexual disorder can be characterized by recurrent intense sexual arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors that occur over a long period of time that involve a few things. First of all, it can involve non-human objects, the suffering or humiliation of self or another person, or children or other non-consenting persons. So again, you put this together, this is somebody that over a long period of time involves doing certain things with or to non-humans, or having the human being suffer humiliation, or to non-consenting persons or children in a sexual way. So we're going to go over some of these. Kind of a funny little picture there for you, but that could be a paraphilia. That's somebody that gets sexual arousal from smelling, dirty shoes. But the paraphilias we're going to talk about are fetishism, partialism, pedophilia, voyeurism, exhibitionism, frauderism, bestiality or zoophilia, transvestitism, masochism, and sadism. So the book goes over these. We're going to go over these a little bit more in detail so you can kind of get a gist of what they are. So you should know what these are and what they entail and how they relate to somebody that's a sexual offender. So first of all, fetishism. It's arousal of a sexual nature to non-living objects. So they frequently, usually males, masturbate while holding or rubbing or smelling the object or has his partner wear the object. Partialism is sexual arousal to body parts, style, or ethnicity. A lot of times you hear people that are turned on by feet or toes or things like that. That could be partialism. Pedophilia, sexual attraction to another who is legally a child. Usually it's a prepubescent or a young child. That's a pedophilia. Voyeurism is observing unsuspecting people who are naked or engaging in sexual activity. Exhibitionism is the exposure of one's genitals, breasts, buttocks to a stranger, flashing yourself. Frauderism is a non-consensual rubbing against another person to achieve sexual arousal. Basically, just think of like a very crowded place you've been in, like an elevator, a concert, Costco, and somebody rubs up against you just slightly and says, "Excuse me, pardon me." They may have been a frauteur that gets a sexual arousal from doing that. So watch yourself in crowded places. Bestiality or zoophilia is a sexual interest or activities with animals. And by the way, sex with animals is illegal. Transvestitism is people that seek sexual pleasure derived from wearing clothing of the opposite sex. So these are some major paraphilias that involve sexual arousal of some sex offenders. Not all, but some. Masochism is a person being aroused to the suffering of being humiliated, beaten, bound, etc., physically, or inflicted pain by oneself or others. Sadism is receiving sexual arousal or gratification in response to another's suffering. That's why you have S&M clubs, sadomasochism clubs. One likes to be tortured, the other likes to give the torturing. So again, just some paraphilias that are out there, and the book again does a good job explaining how these go into the ideation of deviant sexual behavior. There are some disorders that the book talks about. One of them is the cognitive disorder or a thinking error. They're basically thoughts that seem logical to the offender, but we know as not being rational. It's basically the heart thinks one thing and the head thinks a different thing. So I feel it, so it must be true. No injury, no harm, no crime. It wasn't me that did this. It was the alcohol that made me do it. And of course it feels good, so it must be okay. So these are thinking errors or cognitive disorders that a lot of these sex offenders have. Psychodynamic theories. Freud had the theory of a certain sexual stage. Instead of finishing normal development, they're stuck on a sexual stage. The 4 stages that Freud discusses in his research are the oral, anal, phallic, and genital. And of course, some people may be stuck on the anal or the phallic or the genital stage, and therefore have a psychodynamic theory of this disorder. There's biological theories, and again, the book does a good job talking about these. Aggressive sexual behavior can be explained by androgens and androgen-releasing hormones in males. That's why you see very rare female sex offenders or very rare female biological theories that makes sex offender females. Feminist theories. This focuses on why men want to rape women. Rape is always viewed as a means of control, not necessarily sex, but control. Child abuse can also be explained by sexual entitlement over children, usually by males. Attachment theories. This is a very interesting theory about adolescents, young adolescents, 12, 13, teenagers. It's supposed to be the most crucial development stage in sexual and relationship competence. By that time, the child or the adolescent should have learned how to stop aggression and have self-confidence to form positive age-appropriateness relationships with other peers. When this attachment does not happen, therefore there's poor emotional attachments and can wind up committing sexual offenses. So the attachment theory could be parental divorce, dysfunctioning families, all kinds of things that go on to the attachment that does not have strong ties. Behavioral and cognitive behavioral theories. So the book goes on and talks about these, and you can read about those. Every decade or so, new information comes out, new research. Sexual misbehavior in the 1970s was something that could be treated. 1983, in the 80s, sexual behavior is created through stimulus response and maintained. Later in the 1980s, there was a 3-part series of this theory which disturbed development, presence of disinhibitions, and sex offender has deviant sexual fantasies. So throughout time, there's very cyclical theories about why people commit crime. So these are just some of the behavioral cognitive theories that are out there. Psychosocial theories. A lot of researchers say that it's about socialization. People that have poor social skills are not able to get along with other people, maybe have some attachment issues, so therefore they commit sex abuse, they commit rape, they commit all other types of things. Some people say they're blaming this, other people say this is a theory that is not always true. So again, child sex abusers do not know how to form age-appropriate relationships because they did not have that growing up, so therefore they are friends with children or younger persons more than adults if they're an adult. The routine activities theory. Make sure you read about this. It's another well-known theory. And this theory, when it talks about child sex abusers, they have a late onset of deviant behavior, late in their teenage years, low incidence of chronic offending, but a high incidence of previous non-sexual offenses. And we went over what the non-sexual offenses were in Chapter 1. There's a low incidence of stranger abuse and low incidence of networking among offenders. So again, the book will give some good descriptions of these, especially in some of the did you know boxes that you should read. Okay. Continuing with this, the child sexual abuse is pervasive in situations where adults have unguarded access to children. And where do you think that happens? Daycare centers, schools, organized activities, etc., etc. So these people that commit these crimes in these areas can be known as sexual predators because they prey on children within these areas: high school, schools, elementary schools, daycare centers, Boy Scouts, things like that. Okay, that's a brief overview of this chapter, so make sure you read it. And again, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put those in the discussion tab, or you can email me. And with that, you are done for this PowerPoint, and we will see you next time. Thank you.